great people here with some great knowledge, background, skill set. I've been there and done it as well. I've got some really generic questions to ask because it's easier for me. But then, obviously, I'd like to open it up to everyone else here that's got a question or has a particular problem related to startups, not their personal life. And we can just try and mosey on through this with the least hassle humanly possible. Okay. But yeah, Zara, do you want to start? Introduce yourself. What's your name? Where'd you come from?
My name's Zara Smith. I'm a business mentor and I help people bring product to market. So my background is a retail senior buyer for a national retailer. I've worked across Far East categories and also FMCG categories. So I'm bringing some of that business and commercial acumen to business startups, teaching negotiation, commercial skills to help them bring product to market.
I got lucky, didn't I? Talk to you later. My name's Josh, Josh Shires. Previously founded a few companies, one notably being Mouse Products, which is like a 30 million turnover company now. I partly exited that a few years ago to start Fuse, which is a custom fit footwear startup trying to democratise custom fit and possibly enter medical markets because there's not a lot on offer for those poor people with poor feet.
Hi, I'm Davie from Tooley Innovation. We're a consultancy company that is helping technology companies, innovation companies access funding, and that can be looking at innovation grants, it can be looking at innovation loans, R&D tax credits, going through the investment process. So we just are there to try and help you get access to money to be able to do your projects.
My name's Mark Tooley. I'm from Solid Solutions. We supply SolidWorks 3D design software. My role is to work with startups so they can get access to software for a year at no cost. I've been fortunate enough to work with teams at Mouse and what was it, Itch Innovations back in the day. And also the guys at Acrocean are part of our startup program. So I'm just here to hopefully answer any questions you've got in terms of software and requirements.
That's great. It's David Cullimore here. I'm formerly the head of innovation at ProDrive Ventures. So this was the investment program at the most important advanced engineering company, ProDrive. I have to say formally because I'm now at Dyson, but not formally under the Dyson banner. So.
But you can't say that.
I can't say. So I'm formally ProDrive, but we, as part of that program, ran a hardware startup competition called Rapid Challenge, which Mike and his company were winners of. So yeah, a bit of experience in the hardware space.
All ties in nicely that we all know each other secretly. Wonderful. So yeah, first question then is, let's start off about what do you typically see a startup company forgetting, or what maybe you as a startup yourself? I'll let Josh start.
That wasn't the...
Yeah, there's you preparing for action. What's the thing that people forget? What's the thing that everyone looks at products, they all look at funding, they all look at legal, they all look at everything. What's the thing that, down the line you go, crap, really should have paid more attention to?
Well, I think every engineer will tell you it's the customer, right? We all get excited, we all look at, what can we design that's really cool, and forget about, actually someone needs to buy it. So I'd say that's number one. If you read all the books, they'll all tell you, find your consumer first. I've definitely failed to do that every time. And then you're like, crap, I've invented something really cool, but no one wants it. So yeah, look for your consumer first.
Go on.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, look at what your competitors are doing, because I speak to a number of startups, I think we've got about 1,000 through our program. When they tell you about their product, you say, it's a bit similar to this, and they're not aware of that being in the market. It's not necessarily saying that you shouldn't continue. Sometimes being the term kind of leading follower is quite good. Being second just means you can learn from your competitors' mistakes. So it's not always been bad being second to market.
That's a great point. I think the idea is if you're not copying, you're just learning from somebody else's errors or gaps in the market. David, have you got
all I is that don't forget that you're actually running a business. You might be kind of head down in the product and developing all the intricacies of the product, but don't forget things like the unit economics and how's this actually going to work as a business, because engineers can get very into the product, but it's the business that perpetuates, and you can't forget that that's ultimately what you're producing.
I thought all engineers loved a spreadsheet. I thought that was part of your natures. And then Zara, obviously you've got, coming from a retail angle, you've got a very different perspective about what it used to be.
Yeah, I guess from a retail and also from a mentee point of view, and these guys have already mentioned a couple that I've written down actually, but I've put knowing about your customer inside out, so doing customer panelling and understanding what their problems are that they're wanting a solution for. Making time to build your network to help you launch your product, because obviously you need to network with a vast amount of people in terms of branding, packaging, IPs, quality assurance, testing houses, in terms of what you need to bring your product to market legally and safely. Managing the day-to-day, you tend to see a lot of new startups managing just day by day, and really they need to be building their trading plans at least minimum of 12 weeks and aiming for sort of getting that 12-month trading plan so that that work is then segmentised, it can be outsourced and managed more effectively. And then it's knowing how to create strategic business partnerships rather than just transactional relationships, because it's those strategic joint business partnerships that are going to help you to grow and scale over a much longer period, but it's knowing how to create that.
And then, from your background as a buyer, then is that something that you found some startups just come with a product and drop it at your desk and say, how many do you want?
Exactly.
Whereas actually you need to develop those relationships.
And there is a time and a place sometimes for those transactional relationships where you've got gaps. But when you're looking for new businesses to work with, you're looking with a partner that's going to bring new product development. You're looking for partners that are going to eventually manage the category, because you're not just looking at one product, you're looking at whole meters of product and offering a full customer solution. And you're not just thinking about the product, you're thinking about how you're going to sell that product, how you're going to bring that out to customers across online but also in store as well. So it's thinking about that wider sort of business relationship and solving problems together, but also solving problems operationally as well.
Okay. And Ian, you come at this from a very different side of things.
Yeah.
But things that, a lot of startups have started over lockdown, people start up their own companies from within a company and things like that. So there is avenues that a lot of people forget about, which is, I think,
Yeah,
right.
I mean, there's lots of opportunities to kind of access funding, but I mean, we have lots of conversations with particularly startup companies, with entrepreneurs, where they're passionate about their idea and they're not necessarily linking it to the commercial opportunities out there. So to access funding, Innovate UK and other programs out there will only fund you if you've got a commercial route to market. You've got to have a clear understanding of where you're going to take that product, where you're going to take that idea as you develop it.
Great. Unless anyone's got anything to ask on the top of that, or anyone just said.
Just a little bit, Ian.
Yeah.
Oh. Hello, Ian. Just on that final point, in terms of displaying that you know how you're going to take it to market and that it will have... is it sort of building a model and saying, this is how I think it would work?
You can physically demonstrate it as part of your application and your partners within the project. So Innovate UK will allow you to do collaborative projects, and it's always great to build in your final customer into that project. And that demonstrates that there is a need out there for what it is that you want to develop.
So with panels like this, you usually get about, what are the do's? And we've just gone through, some things not to forget. What are the don'ts? What do you recommend highly that people do not do? Possibly a common misconception about a startup and startup life, other than just spending all the money in the first week.
I'd probably say choose your partners wisely, because it's all good from my perspective, obviously we can give the software away for a certain amount of time, but that's only good if you can find experienced hires and people to use these tools, because there are lots of startup offers out there. Then I would say just try and be a bit mindful of finding the right talent pool as your business grows. Because it's very easy to be sort of stuck in today. It's just what's going to happen as you scale.
Yeah, kind of just adding on to that, kind of partners, I guess, and also things like who you start a company with. Being realistic about your own abilities. If you're very technically minded, do you need a commercial co-founder? Being aware of your weaknesses and trying to fill those gaps. Because, as I say, there are so many people who approach this thinking, well, if I make it, it will just sell itself, when frankly it doesn't. But equally, there are so many, let's say, more commercially minded people who underestimate the difficulties of making, a product. Take what Mike's doing. is phenomenally difficult and complicated, and therefore you need, responsibility in that direction. So pick who you work with wisely. It's obviously one of the biggest decisions and make or break for your startup, but unless you're exceptionally talented, exceptionally arrogant, don't start on your own.
I'd also say don't be afraid to seek advice. Yes, you've got partners, but you've also got kind of informal partners, looking at non-executive directors, looking at sort of the growth hubs in the local areas. They'll give you sort of business advice, and they'll look at all aspects of your business. So it's always good to get somebody to get an outside view of what it is that you're trying to do, what it is that you are missing in your plan. They might spot it where you've missed it out.
Well, Zara, you're a mentor and probably one of those people that I think Ian's mentioned there. Is that something you find yourself doing a lot?
Yeah, it's giving that sort of commercial angle aside of the product development. But a few don'ts that I've got from here is don't forget to ask for feedback. So constantly asking in terms of your service of what you're delivering, because it's much about great product, it's as much about delivering the service of that product as well and hitting the SLAs. Don't take any rejection to heart, because a lot of people have these big aspirations that they want to get certain products into these aspirational retailers like Liberty and things like that. And sometimes startups have to start up smaller to build up their books, build up their references, so then they can move up towards that. So it's just understanding that it's a process.
Great. Well, and Josh, have you got any absolute fail-safes?
I might repeat a lot, but I think don't quit. You only fail when you quit. Don't rush into hiring when you've only got 12 months of cash flow, and especially in the UK, if you hire someone, you can't just fire them. So be very careful about hiring, and then look for your weaknesses. So work with someone. Sorry, I'm repeating it, but yeah, find someone that is good at what you're not good at.
Definitely. So I mentioned sort of startups have spun out of existing companies. I mean, is there a piece of advice mainly for that angle? Because obviously if you've got the skills already in-house, you've got the people in-house, the software in-house, you've got all the connections into industry for maybe a different product. Is there something you maybe have seen that people might need to get a bit more advice about with starting up something fresh from within an existing company?
I suppose you've also already got supplier links, as you say. Quite often I work with spin-outs from existing customers or companies, and they've already got that network built up. But one thing we're certainly trying to do, because we've got sort of 30,000 customers, it's like trying to connect with these companies. I'm listening to Mike earlier, I'm thinking, there's probably some great companies you want to talk to, and I suppose we take it for granted because we've got a CRM with everything in there. So it's just trying to make sure that you can use what you've already got from your network, and that's such a massive part of it.
I mean, with the Rapid Challenge, David, did you have companies starting up new products, or was it really just bare bones new start-up companies?
Yeah, it tended to be new, fresh companies, fresh startups. I mean, it's obviously slightly different if you're coming out of an established larger company. I mean, what I would say is that there has to be some element of danger. There has to be a possibility that your startup can die. Otherwise, if you just sit within the company with fallback mechanisms that are there, you won't progress and iterate and move the business on at the pace that you need to. Because if you are going to treat yourself like a startup and act like a startup, it is probably the best advice I can give, because the larger the company, the likely you develop slower, move slower. Yeah, cherry pick the bits that you can, but there needs to be a culture and a
nimbleness.
Yeah, exactly. It has to be progress, and you've got to stand here on 2 feet, otherwise you'll always be dependent.
I mean, Josh, you've got obviously Mouse as a recognisable brand, but your companies that you started up have come with all that experience that you've gained. But as that come out of, it's a separate, fresh startup as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
So what have you taken with you in that knowledge? Is that something that really set the bar for you, that you already knew what you were doing?
I'd like to say I took a lot of lessons and learned from them, but as I said before, I think I made the same mistakes in a lot of ways. Started a bar in Sheffield that no one wanted to go to as well in COVID, so that is good. So that failed. But yeah, I think just you've got to be relentless. It doesn't matter if some things don't work out. I think the thing that's taught me is when you're comparing, if I look to the side of me and look at everyone else and what they're doing, if you're going to work 9 to 5, it's probably not going to work out. So if you really want to make it work, you've just got to sacrifice a lot. I think every time that seems to work. And eventually you'll find your route if you survive long enough. Yeah.
That's it. Survival is the key. Just keep swimming. Ian, you obviously TBAT and what you do, helping people find, ways of finding funding, and they might be able to find funding from within an existing business. Can you tell us a bit about that, and that maybe from a startup coming out of an existing company?
There's lots and lots of different sources of funding out there, right from a few thousand from local enterprise partnerships. So you've got the Sheffield one round, you've got D2D covering Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire, and it's just understanding what programmes they've got, and they can help with either what we call revenue grants, which is strategic help, or capital grants with a bit of equipment. The next stage up is probably looking at collaborations with universities, KTP, knowledge transfer partnerships, where you're taking on an individual from the university with a lot of technical experience, but you don't employ the university employees. And then beyond that, you've then got the Innovate UK, where you're looking at you've just accessed a £50,000 grant, which is 100% funded, but there's also 70% funded from anywhere from £100,000 to £2 million. So there's different scales of sources of funding to go out there. And then, once you've spent your money, and if it's technically difficult, you can access R&D tax credits. So that's money back from HMRC to support your money that you've already spent. So there's different ways and there's different sources, and it's just understanding that landscape that's out there and what are the opportunities and where's the best location for you to sit. The LEPs are a bit postcode lottery. If you're a manufacturer in Cheshire, forget it, you're not going to get anything. But if you're digital, think about the North East, we've got a big digital program there. So think about where's the best location, where you can access those skills.
That's great. So, unless Zara hasn't have you got anything?
I can't answer that question better than that.
That's all right then, because that takes me nicely onto my next question, which is we're in Sheffield today. Most startup events I've always been to are in London, because that is where startups happen, as we're all told. But as you mentioned, there's Transform South Yorkshire. There's so many different. Where I'm from in West Cumbria, there's things there for around nuclear and sustainable energy. So, what is the biggest difference, startups-wise, sort of away from the big city? I mean, you've given an example there about different, if you're a hardware manufacturer, Cheshire's probably not the best place to be. But is there any other advice you've got and things you've seen that might actually be positives, rather than you don't always have to be sat in a one-bedroom flat in East London, clinging on for dear life?
A lot of the schemes in the UK are national, so it doesn't matter where you are. The bit that varies is the local enterprise partnerships, and what business support they will focus on in their local area, and the pots of money can vary from a few £1,000s up to £250,000, for some programs. So it's just understanding, well, actually, what's your growth plans, and when do you need to access that finance to take you to the next level?
Yeah.
And what's going to be available to be able to support you through that journey.
And Mark, you must do a lot of travelling around with all the various startups that you help facilitate. What have you seen as a...
Interesting, over the COVID time I got a real spike of applicants, because there was obviously the furlough money and people had time and they'll follow their dreams. Suddenly people wanting free software, was pretty busy. But I noticed now, particularly in the sort of agri-tech sector, where you've got people that are actually physically in the field, whether they're London-based, there was always this kind of perception that London was the startup hub, but I think there's so much more going on in the West Country. Scotland's massive for IoT. There's real kind of hubs that people forget that it's not just London central. And I suppose SolidWorks would be quite smart. That's what they did. They started giving the startups connected tools, so they can have like data management location. So anyone, doesn't matter where you are, can dial in. And so that's, it's made a big difference. And also hiring as well. People are not restricted now just to hiring in their own sort of local area. Suddenly it doesn't really matter if you're up in Edinburgh, you know, and you've got an office in London. It really doesn't matter. So I think it's probably in some ways made it's harder to keep that team environment, and I think a lot of businesses still like to have regular meetings to keep that team link, but also it's opened up a lot of other avenues.
Let's say, Josh, have you always been based in Sheffield for your startups?
No.
But it brought you back here though.
COVID.
All right.
I mean, I guess if you're making stuff actually in England, you know, you're going to struggle being in London unless it's software, aren't you? So we've seen the advantage of being here for manufacturing, the cost, you know, per square metre, factory space, things like that. You know, you've got a real advantage. You've got the Made in Sheffield and the Cutlers. How are they called? Cutlers
Guild? No.
Come on, what is it?
Cutlers Hall.
Yeah, the Cutlers Hall. So the big, the very old networking group. That's great. If you can get into that or talk to them, there's so many really influential, powerful people actually in Sheffield, Yorkshire. And if you're making things, then that's quite powerful.
You make that sound like some kind of dark, cloaked society.
It felt like that a little bit. So, yeah, I definitely recommend that. But it's tough, actually. Like, I want to give you all the positives, but talent pool smaller, so you've got to really sell hard. But you have the Peak District, so I'm constantly trying to convince people from London to come here because it's a great city.
As you should.
If not here, find them.
Exactly. Zara?
Yeah, so I did ask my mentees, because I've got some in London and some in Yorkshire as well. So I did ask them about the different pros and cons, and from my London mentees, they said it's great to be surrounded by lots of innovative, diverse, international, open-minded people. There's lots of different startup events and incubators to attend. There's also lots of investors already based in London as well, and that can be the tricky part up north of finding the investors. But it is highly competitive. It attracts a lot of talent. So it does make it, but also the cost of living and also the cost of startup makes it very difficult to sustain. So that does give up north more of an advantage in terms of those costs are smaller. But finding sort of like that network, if you don't already have that network, is much harder in the north than it is down in the south, particularly when it comes to finding investors.
Yeah. David? Oh, go on, because obviously back onto investments.
Yeah, I've also thought about the university side of things. So from the point of view of if you want to work with the university, it's about which university you want to work with and trying to find the right knowledge expert in the right university is a bit of a nightmare. You know, you can obviously contact the university business advisors and they will put you in contact for their university. But probably the best route to go through is the knowledge transfer partnership groups because they will work with all universities. They will understand what the project is that you're looking to do and help you, direct you to the right expert that you want to engage with across all the universities.
And Davie, have you go on?
Yeah, I was going to say, I have kind of mixed feelings about this because obviously London is super powerful for getting certain types of businesses going. I don't think it's possible for many different reasons, talent, access to finance, all that other stuff. But kind of from the perspective of developing a physical product, generally out of really expensive real estate is better. You know, depending on what you're doing, if it's agriculture, if it's marine, if it's you need to be in the places where where you are. My prior background was in motorsport, and obviously the Motorsport Valley, the Oxfordshire areas, is very ripe for producing really advanced composites and machining structures and all that kind of stuff. So I think there are good opportunities outside of London, depending on the type of startup. And there will be certain talent pools available. I mean, the Oxfordshire area is full of great, Warwickshire area is full of great design engineers and so on. And I think there's going to be an interesting knock-on effect from the kind of Form 1 cost cap. You've suddenly got a load of really talented engineers and these people can start companies. So I wouldn't get too fixated on them. I think there are definitely possibilities. Focus that energy on trying to make a product. And, there are other ways of getting talent as well. So don't get too fixated.
You've had enough of my dulcet tones. Has anyone got any questions? Go on, Jude.
Thank you all for the interesting talk. Josh, just out of curiosity, how did you go about scaling your company when you were like around $500,000 in revenue to mil, especially when you have to move from one sort of audience group to another as you scale?
I mean, we did crowdfunding to go from sort of 50k revenue to $1 million, which obviously really helps. One, it confirms and validates your market, but also funds your next 6 months, doesn't it? So that would be answer one. I mean, currently, like, Mouse is trying to increase revenues by looking at how do we expand our market potential and different consumers, and then you've just got to expand horizontally in terms of your product, really, because eventually you're going to saturate your target consumer with one product, and then you need to be like, okay, well, we're in this category, now we've saturated it, what's the next category? But you've got to have that plan, especially with hardware, 2 years in advance. So hopefully that answers the question.
That's great. Has anyone else got any specific questions? There's one behind me.
Hi, Ben here. Another question for Josh. Just building on the previous question, how did you find your first customer and go from like 1 to 10?
Oh yeah, upset a lot of people. Is probably the answer. I think your first. I mean, that's like the footwear that we're doing at the moment. You've got to find your early adopters. They're key. You've got to find those people that are so interested, and their problem is so intense, and their satisfaction of their current solution so low that they're like, I'll try anything. So find that group of people, but just accept that you're not going to probably please your first customers, but work with people. Say, look, build a community, basically. So, like with the footwear, we're trying to build a community and sort of take them on and say, look, what I'm going to ship you is going to be terrible to begin with, but bear with, we'll ship you another one, and you've got to take that hit up front, and then as long as they go away with a positive experience, sorry, excuse me, they will talk to other people, and even if it's not about your product, even if they're just like, I love this team, this is a great team, you should shop from them, support them, because you're sort of building a little bit of a cult in the beginning, and then that will expand until eventually when you're shipping a product, a product that is actually really good, and then I think it takes that next level up. When the product's really good, people really start to talk, and your advertising is much better. But build that community. Your first 10 customers, they need to be your best friends. One fun story is one of our first customers at Mouse. She was a nurse called the Crazy Caroline, and she bought a case. It fell apart. It was terrible. But she was like, I just like you guys, and we used to call her up and like, oh, we ship you a new product, like, how's this one? And eventually she actually invested in us as well when we did the Angel's Den. She put $2,000 into us, and like 5 years on, that's worth quite a lot of money now. And so it's just like taking people along for the journey in the beginning, I think. Because imagine how many people you should speak to now and just promote you, self-promotion. That's amazing.
Hi, yeah, so I have two questions actually. One is for you and the one for Ian. I think I'll first ask you if that's okay. I work with the university in the commercialization team, specifically for engineering, but we have a situation where we believe that academics and just the public in general are not really aware of what entrepreneurship means and commercializations, and it's really full of buzzwords and concepts that might not be completely true. I think panels like this are amazing because then people can actually share their experience. Have you seen in all your career, and what do you think is the biggest challenge in terms of educating a little bit on founders and entrepreneurs of what things mean and exactly how the journeys look like?
I think the challenge that I've seen since I've come into mentoring is you're working with fantastically creative people that have got amazing innovative solutions, but it's just getting them on that sort of path of understanding. And it is also creating an educational pathway of how to bring product to market as well, because since I've come to mentoring, it's making that simpler. Particularly, like we say, in Yorkshire, that network is harder to find than it is necessarily in London. So for me, it's been about creating those trainings into sort of bite-size trainings that are easy to consume, because some of the information is quite heavy. Like when it comes to commercial agreements and negotiation tactics, strategic negotiation, you know, some of that is quite daunting for people who haven't necessarily done that kind of work and come into big retail and things like that, because it's a completely different world to necessarily just launching a product. So for me, it's been about supporting people to bring that together, but in an educational way and in a way that's bite-sized and easy to understand. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. And the second question is for Ian, and it's regarding, we've seen that every year investors are approaching startups and spin-outs at earlier stages. We understand from their perspective, of course, they are securing, you know, if the company has the future and potential, that they are the first ones. Do you see that beneficial in terms of acquiring other types of funding related to, you know, the KTN or KTPs or anything related to Innovate UK?
It can actually be the other way round. So if you've got a good product and you've had some grant funding towards it and you've effectively got a KTP or an Innovate UK, it's demonstrating that an independent body's got a bit of belief in what you're doing, which makes it then easier to attract the investment. So it's easier going the other way around.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd recommend that.
Great. I think we've got time for one last question before we're catching up with our end of our time, I think. Has anyone else got a question on this dark side of the room? I mean, lighting-wise, not just the general atmosphere and mood, but...
Hey, just picking up on what you were saying before about shipping products to customers and having customer in the loop product development almost. Where do everyone on the panel see the most success between hardware startups that put products out that might not necessarily be fully commercialized or fully finished and need iteration and need the customer to go on the journey with them, versus companies that might spend more time up front figuring everything out, figuring out all the commercials, and then going to market with what they would consider a finished product?
I feel like you're going to be one end of the scale and I'm going to be the other.
I'm just curious because on the software side of things, it's more and more common, like if you look at gaming, for example, for games to be shipped before they're necessarily finished, and the customers are expected now to be a part of the prototyping phase. But in hardware, I'm not sure how far that scales, so I'm curious to see where you might have seen successes or failures.
I think Mike is a good example of this, where as far as possible, try and develop a product that is platformable. So you go into it with a lead customer, lead application, but be open to the opportunities that other customers bring to you, because you don't necessarily know all the needs and the problems that other people have, and your product might be a solution to. So the adaptability of your hardware is, and your ability to react to these customers is going to be really key for your business survival. So, and I know that's not possible with every type of hardware product, because you've got to make something. There's mold tools and there's only a certain amount of stuff that you can change, but as far as where it's possible, try and think of it like a platform technology.
Can you ask the question again?
Where do you see more success for hardware startups? Either on having customers in the loop in product development, where you're shipping something that might not necessarily be fully realized and fully finished, versus startups that take more time in planning and commercialization before they enter the market with something that they might consider a more complete finished product.
So you're asking, like, what's the better route?
Yeah, where have you guys seen businesses be successful?
Quick and dirty, or considered longer term?
So I mean, if you read the Lean Startup, everyone familiar with the Lean Startup? I think you should definitely read that. Everyone read it, but it will convince you that you can ship something crap straight away. But it's the Lean Startup's about software, right? Where you can ship something and basically ship it again for free, essentially, right? And iterate it. You can't do that with hardware, but there is a balance. I would say it's all about validating your customer, right? So if you're making a hydrogen, powered ship, you probably don't need to validate that there's going to be a customer or a demand, because if you actually create that vessel, it solves so many problems, and that's why like VC backers will go, well, yeah, if you create that, that's definitely going to sell. Whereas like in consumer and software products, you're inventing stuff that people might not want. And that's why like venture capital is like, you've got to prove demand before we'll even touch it, especially in the UK. So it depends what it is. If you're doing really highly engineered stuff, usually you don't have to validate. So if it's nuclear power, everyone wants energy, so therefore we'll fund it. Whereas if it's phone accessories or custom fit shoes, do people actually need that? So it's like, how do you very quickly validate that demand and very cheaply? So sometimes you have to make something crap, get someone to buy it, and be like, well, hold on a minute, they bought it, and it's still terrible. So therefore there must be some kind of demand. So if I make it really good, there'll be even more demand, So I think it's a balance, but it comes back to, do you need to validate your business model and your product?
It's whether you can eliminate some of that as well by doing customer paneling before you start, so that you're getting that feedback, so you're not wasting that time either.
One warning though, customers don't always know what they want. And they'll tell you they like something and they definitely don't.
And that's why you've got to put your product in front of them, so that they are.
You make bags, don't you?
And then I do. Exactly.
Yeah, we've made.
So yes, that's right. I think
Long
at
time
in Birmingham,
Yeah.
2015. Exactly.
Long time ago. Great bags.
Well, yeah. But it's the same thing. You have to put it in front of them so that they can say, I like that, I don't like that. This bit didn't work.
And get them
They
to break
often
it.
love it more than you're expecting.
Get them to break it as well. It's always key.
Keep improving them.
Yeah. Keep improving, yeah.
Not do what British Labour did, was continue to
yeah. Don't ignore the feedback. Keep the loop going.
Yeah, I don't feel that you need to go to market with a fully finished, fully featured product. What's the minimum viable product that you can kind of put out there that you can then continue to develop the bells and whistles on top of that?
Yeah. 2 books you should read: The Lean Startup, and then there's a guy that did another version called the Lean Product Roadmap or something.
I'm definitely setting up a book club.
Yeah, so that one I'd say you could use for the Lean Product Playbook. Yeah, that is more hardware related, and it talks about doing the customer research up front and finding the problem. That's pretty good.
Yeah, there is good customer research businesses like Claro. That's what a lot of big retailers use. But I mean, there's obviously there's things like Typeform if you want to do something quick and dirty. But Claro is quite an official route to go down.
Is it?
It probably is, yeah, but they are.
Excellent. Well, right, I think we're going to have to wrap up because I know we're running way over, but this has been great. Some really, really good answers, and hopefully you've all taken away at least one snippet of, I think I said joy then, but it's not. It's one snippet of information that's going to help you in whatever stage you're at with your startup or your idea. If you give this panel a lovely round of applause.